Hey folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania, we're taking a look at the dark oddball comedy that is Adam Rehmeier's Dinner in America. Dinner in America! The plot of Dinner in America follows Simon, played by Kyle Gallner, and Patty, played by Emily Skeggs. Simon is a lead singer in a sort of hardcore punk band who is attempting to fund their next album by subjecting himself to medical experiments. Oh, and he's also wanted by the police for being a pyromaniac. So that's fun. Patty is this sort of bullied 20-something who lives at home with a sort of dully dysfunctional family and is struggling with her job at the local pet store. The two sort of collide under strange circumstances, and Simon moves in with Patty's family, and sort of slowly they start to warm to one another. You've got this very oddball couple thing going on, and they start, or pretty much unintentionally, making each other's lives more pleasant. They're sort of surrounded by, you know, closing shops and these sort of barren bits of tarmac with just, you know, grass growing through them. It's this sort of arse end of America sort of world that they live in, and it's pretty much a story about two people who shouldn't get along sort of making each other's lives better. All of this is accompanied by very, very dark humour and some very, very silly humour. Todd Solondz has been brought up a lot when people discuss this film. I can understand that, especially sort of how the film opens. It is very dark, slightly weird. And then I've also seen a lot of people talk about Napoleon Dynamite, which I'll get into more, but do not watch this if that's what you're thinking the film is going to be, because it's not the sort of warm, fluffy film that I think that is. It has moments in which the dialogue has that very similar element. You have this sort of dysfunctional people sort of finding friendship in there, but it's nowhere near as sort of nice and charming and sort of awkwardly sweet. That in large part is down to Gallner's Simon, who is introduced as being absolutely vile. I really didn't like him, and to the point that I was like, I don't know if I can watch this film if this is the central character. He's very much set up as chaotic and really quite horrible. I mean, there are funny moments, and you side with him more than perhaps some of the characters around him to start with, but that's only because they're even more horrible. I mean, early on there's some quite choice homophobic language which I could see putting people off straight away, but it's testament to Gallner's performance that you actually really start to warm to him as the film goes on. It works really nicely because actually the fact that they set him up as being so horrible really means that there is a character arc. There's a lot of films that are this sort of odd couple, for lack of a better word, sort of romantic comedy, in which the bad boy is completely like normal. It's from the start. He's a bit angry maybe, and then progresses to being a bit less angry, but he's charming from the start, whereas here he's horrible and then you warm to him, but they still keep that sort of darker edge to him. It's a really, really well written character and a really great performance.
Hey Mum, can I go see a rock show?
What's the group?
They're this really cool group. The music is almost educational.
The same goes for Skeggs' performance as Patty though. She has perhaps a more difficult role in that Patty is far young, like she's a 20-something woman who acts like a 14-year-old, is very naive, doesn't understand all the crude things that Simon says, just, you know, thrashes around in a bedroom listening to punk music. It's the sort of performance that could very easily be annoying, or could really lurch the film in the wrong direction, because it does have that perhaps Napoleon Dynamite element to it of a character being, you know, odd and not necessarily a real portrayal of a person, but it stays grounded in the world that the film sets up. She is, I mean, everything is slightly heightened for comedic effect. The bullies are really horrible. Everyone is like a caricature, but of something you recognise. No one ever sort of branches into a point where you go, I haven't met someone like you. That's the thing. Everyone you go, oh well, that's that person. And it works really well because there is clearly a critique of America in there. I mean, you know, the title. There are multiple dinner sequences, although that's not why the film is called what it is. It's all tied down to a reality that you recognise, even though it's a comedy where they've bumped everything up slightly, and Skip's performance is the perfect point to see that.
They upped the reward. They said you assaulted some lady. Tried to burn her house down?
Now, like I said, the humour in the film can be very varied. It front loads a lot of that darker, slightly off humour in which you don't know whether to laugh because it's funny or laugh because it's making you uncomfortable. And for me, the film started off a bit too uncomfortable. It works much better once you've gotten to the point that the characters have met each other and they've started to like one another. Because early on, it feels like it could very easily tip into some really, really uncomfortable territory. Which, yeah, it does manage some laughs early on, or I found it did, but it was more uncomfortable. I do wonder if on a second viewing it would be better, because you know where it's going, so you know it's not going to go to the darker places that you think it might do. But it's later on that you get more of the silly humour, which is often tinged with something darker, but it goes into, there's a few more sort of slapstick moments or sort of cleverly dumb dialogue. And also, you just get a more human heart to the film, which grounds it and means that those darker moments don't hit you as hard, because it doesn't feel like it's unrelentingly dark and bleak and trying for shock. It feels like that's perhaps where it's going right at the start, and it's only going to try and shock you and make you outraged, where that's not what it's going for. It does like its characters, and you will by the end. Or at least I did.
Buckle up! I drive fucking nuts!
The cinematography all has this very sort of grungy, desolate, decayed feel. Like I said, you have lots of shots of people stood around where, like, there's weeds growing through everything, things are starting to fall apart, there's like a high street that looks weirdly empty, and it's all captured in a very sort of wide screen, often with characters centrally framed, that adds this sort of element of making the characters feel isolated and small, and just that they don't really that they don't belong because they stand out, and that works really well. I mean, everything's been covered in this sort of heavy grain to keep that sort of grotty feeling that you're in an area that people don't really want to be, that anyone who's had the opportunity to get away has gotten away. And it works really well because, again, it grounds the film in a reality, even though, you know, there are moments that are quite heightened. There's, you know, some nice bright pops of colour that, again, stand out against the more sort of desolate areas. And I just, yeah, it works really nicely as a sort of portrait of America falling down, but without being too horrible to look at. I guess the only perhaps criticism is there's nothing too out there with the visuals. I mean, the most sort of striking moment is that there's a bit at a punk gig later on that feels very sort of immersive. You feel very much in there because it's all shot close up, which sort of juxtaposes nicely with the wider shots that the rest of the film. It's this sort of intimate moment that you feel the difference. That works really well. But there's, you know, there's no like wonderful crane moves or anything. But the comedy in the film is much more in its characters, in their interaction, not in sort of visual gags hit like that. So a more restrained visual style works much better. The soundtrack is actually really good. It comes to us from John Swihart, who also did the score for Napoleon Dynamite. So as much as I told you that there wasn't much Napoleon Dynamite in this film, there is actually quite a lot. I mean, the soundtrack here isn't sort of funky, weird, awkward organ like it is in Napoleon Dynamite. There's a lot of sort of heavy-ish sounding beats, which I know sounds weird, sort of hip-hop, but distorted. There's a lot of sort of big, distorted synths that sound relatively cheap. So they have this sort of heavy alternate edge that isn't necessarily as punky as you might think it is, but it works really well, especially when sometimes that music is paired with something really mundane. So it sort of, you know, you've just got people walking, but this heavy sort of distorted synthy bass and drums going that just make it look a bit awkward, but in a sort of endearing way. It does mean as well that when the punk music that is in the film pops up, I mean, Dinner in America is the punk song that you get from that punk gig later on. It works really well because your ears haven't been blasted with it for the entire film, so you feel, oh god, you notice it, and you see it as the moment that it is. Also, it's a really good song. It's proper like hardcore punk. I was waiting to be really disappointed to find that it was like some sort of toned down naff punk, but it was really good. And also, there's another lighter song in there, which is Watermelon, which I dare you to not have that stuck in your head for ages after watching it. It's still stuck in my head anyway. So no, the music's really good.
I think I'm weird.
Oh yeah, no, you're fucking weird.
Well, is weird cool?
In your case, no.
Basically, Dinner in America is not going to be for everyone, and I think some of the things that have been sort of used to try and get people to see it might set you up for the wrong thing. But if the humour lands with you, which it started to for me about 20 minutes in, and then I was thoroughly enjoying it, there is something really special. It's in large part down to its two wonderful leads that you really start rooting for, you really start warming to, because they do feel like people. They're in no means perfect, and that works really well because it feels like a film written by someone who is awkward and is a misfit, who doesn't fit in with the society around them, and that it's written for people that feel that way. It's not some sort of Hollywood sanitised, oh, aren't these people a bit weird, but we love them anyway. It's not that sort of film. You genuinely start to care about the characters because they feel much more like people you know or you are. That's the thing, it does feel like it actually cares about its characters, even though it is portraying them as being weird and different. And I liked that about it. And that they are still flawed. It just... Yeah, I just warmed to it, and by the end I had a big smile on my face because I'd enjoyed being in those characters' company, and I would quite happily watch the film again. It's out through Arrow in the UK. I did see that. I don't know if it's out in America. Hopefully it will be. If it isn't, I might be completely wrong. But no, it's definitely, if you've got the Arrow channel, it's definitely worth a watch. If you think the humour will land with you. But that is just my opinion. Let me know down in the comments what you've thought of Dinner in America, whether you want to watch it or whether you have watched it. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I shall see you next time.